Hello, beautiful souls. I'm glad you're here. Let's have a conversation. There's a moment in growth that feels subtle at first. It doesn't arrive with celebration, and it doesn't arrive with clarity. It arrives with a question. What if I'm not broken? And that question can feel disorienting because for a long time, you may have interpreted your sensitivity as weakness, your exhaustion as failure, your emotional depth as too much, your boundaries as selfish, your restlessness as instability. You may have quietly carried the belief that something about you needed fixing, that if you could just regulate better, perform better, or push through better, you'd finally feel normal. But then something shifts. You begin to notice that what you've been calling broken might actually be evolving. Let's talk about what that shift really is. For many women, the I'm broken narrative forms early. It forms when your emotions were inconvenient, when your needs were minimized, when your intuition was questioned, or when your boundaries were labeled dramatic. Over time, you internalize the message. If I feel this way, something must be wrong with me. So you adapt, you become more agreeable, more high functioning, more contained. You manage your reactions, you swallow your discomfort, and you call survival maturity. And that all works until it doesn't, because eventually the strategies that kept you safe start to feel tight. You start feeling reactive in situations that once felt manageable. You start questioning dynamics you used to tolerate. You feel emotional waves you can't explain. And the old narrative kicks in. I'm regressing. I should be over this. Why am I still triggered? Why can't I just handle this like everyone else? But here's what's actually happening. You're becoming more aware, and awareness always feels destabilizing before it feels empowering. When you begin healing, your nervous system stops numbing what it once ignored. You start feeling what you used to override. You start noticing what you used to rationalize, and you start questioning what you used to endure. That doesn't mean you are falling apart. It means you are waking up. Broken feels chaotic. Evolution feels uncomfortable. There's a difference. Broken feels random. Evolution feels patterned, even if you don't understand the pattern. Broken feels hopeless. Evolution feels disorienting, but directional. You are not breaking down. You are shedding adaptation. Let's be clear about something important. When you start evolving, you will temporarily feel worse before you feel better, not because you are damaged, but because you are processing. You are revisiting old narratives with new consciousness, and that can feel like grief. Grief for how long you minimized yourself, or grief for how much you tolerated. Then there's grief for the version of you that survived but never felt fully safe. And that grief can masquerade as self doubt. You may think, I used to be stronger than this, but were you stronger or were you more numb? That's not judgment, that's clarity. Evolution often looks like increased emotional range. You cry more easily, you notice tension sooner, you feel misalignment faster. Instead of calling that instability, think of it as your sensitivity returning. When you were in survival mode, you had to blunt certain signals. Now your system trusts you enough to feel again. That's not broken. That's integration. The moment you realize you're not broken is quiet. It's not a motivational speech. It's more like this. You mean I'm not malfunctioning? This is me transitioning. You begin to see that your triggers are not character flaws. They are information. They are revealing unresolved wounds, unmet needs, outdated narratives. Instead of shaming yourself for reacting, you get curious. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? You start asking, what is this showing me? That shift changes everything because self blame keeps you stuck, but curiosity moves you forward. When you believe you are broken, you rush to fix. When you realize you are evolving, you allow yourself to unfold. Unfolding is slower, less dramatic, more layered. You may circle back to themes you thought you'd mastered. You may feel raw in areas you thought were healed. But evolution is not linear, it's spiral shaped. You revisit not because you failed, but because you're integrating at a deeper level. You are not behind. Think of it as being in process. And process feels messy before it feels coherent. Here's another important truth. Sometimes the I'm broken narrative protects you from accountability, not in a harsh way, but in a subtle one. If you're broken, then you're powerless. If you're evolving, then you are responsible for choosing differently. That can feel heavier because now you can't blame everything on damage. You have to participate in your becoming. That participation looks like choosing rest even when productivity feels safer, speaking up even when silence feels familiar, walking away even when attachment feels strong. That's not fixing yourself, that's refining yourself. And refinement can feel tender. If you've been feeling more emotional lately, or more reflective, if you've been more easily triggered, before you assume something is wrong, ask, what if I'm just more conscious? What if I'm noticing sooner? What if my nervous system is recalibrating? There is strength in that awareness. It takes courage to let go of the broken identity because sometimes it's familiar. It explains your past. It excuses your coping, but you are allowed to outgrow that story. You are allowed to say, I wasn't broken, I was adapting. I'm not falling apart, I'm reorganizing. I'm not too much, I'm becoming more honest. And honesty always feels vulnerable at first. If this conversation is helping you reframe what you've been experiencing, I'm glad you're here. This is the inner shift work, where we look beneath behavior and into the narrative shaping it. And if you'd like to continue these reflections, you can subscribe and join me here. And remember, you are not broken. Evolution is rarely comfortable.